Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale on what is a victorious week after we saw the Wildcats men's team defeat ASU on Saturday. Women's team not so good on Monday afternoon against Stanford. They beat Cal over the weekend. The number 2 team in the country gave them some fits. So we'll talk about all of that. But we're going to dive deep later in the show to talk about men's basketball with Bruce Pasco, the ace reporter for the Arizona Daily Star. So really looking forward to having him on. But Shane, a lot to go over this week. Let's start with, get into buy or sell right off the bat. And that's presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com and use what you can see in Shane's hand or in my new background if you're watching the video behind me.
Such a nice background.
Thank you.
You got your Gronk bobblehead there. You got ice shakers on both sides of you. You got your bases covered. It's great.
Work in progress, Shane. Work in progress. But go to iceshaker.com. Use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and you will get $5 off. Or you can go to fanatics.com and find your ice shakers on there. All right, Shane. Number one. So we know Arizona beat ASU 69-60 on Saturday. But buy or sell. Arizona's starters are playing entirely too many minutes.
Well, I want to back up real quick and just mention that I this morning, and we're recording this on Monday, I was behind a vehicle which had the license plate U of A sucks, SUX on it. So that person's probably had a rough couple months between U of A football beating them and then women's basketball last week because the women's team took care of it.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And then the men's team this past weekend. So, thoughts and prayers with that individual. As far as your question, I'm going to sell it, Eric. I'm actually not entirely concerned about the bench. I think that we've seen enough from enough guys to where I think that if other guys needed to step up, it would be okay. And it's not like Azuolas Tubelis, for example, is averaging about 30 minutes a game, which isn't that bad. It's about right for a starter, I think, in college hoops. Cedric Henderson, we know he's the first guy off the bench. He looks sharp, filling in for Courtney Ramey when Ramey wasn't eligible for those first 3 games of the season. Henry Vesar, I know you were at the Fiesta Bowl, and I want to hear all about that later. But I don't know if you went back and watched the entire game, but Vesar had his moments in there. On both
throwing a little fire too, which I like.
Both sides of the ball had a nice block in the first half. He had a big layup to stop the ASU momentum because ASU just kept. I mean, the first 5 minutes of the second half were just disastrous as they could be for Arizona, and Vesar had a hand in stopping that. So he's starting to come around. Kylan Boswell, I know he doesn't play a lot of minutes either, but when he had to fill in for Kirk Creasy a while back, I thought he looked sharp. We even talked about it. It was almost an Andre Iguodala-like stat line, and we remember how young he is. So I'm not concerned about it. In terms of, there's a difference between depth and having a bunch of guys play 20, 25 minutes a game, and Arizona doesn't have to be one of those teams. They are. With Tubelis and Ballo being conference player of the year candidates early, and Kirk Creasy leading the Pac-12 in assists, Pell Larson stepping up. I don't think it's a concern. Injuries and foul trouble and combination thereof could change that. But now I'm going to go ahead and sell your question.
Okay, I'm going to buy it for now, and I'll tell you why. I think it's about if there's an injury to this team.
Yeah.
I mean, with Vesar, you can plug in, for Ballo or Tubelis. Obviously, you're losing a lot, the scoring presence, etc. Guards, I guess there's some depth in case Creasy goes down, but it's just you have guys that are just outside of Henderson, and Vesar's getting a little more time. It's concerning. Now, as long as they're healthy, Shane, there's no problem. Then you can sell it.
But isn't that true of every college basketball team? I mean, how many college basketball teams have like 8 or 9 guys who could be bona fide starters for them,
Houston last year lost their best player, Marcus Sasser, and went to the Final Four.
Well, if you're going to throw facts at me, well, they didn't go to the Final Four last year, but the year before that,
they went to the.
But they beat Arizona and got to the Elite Eight.
They went to the Elite Eight. Sorry, excuse me.
But your point is taken.
So if Arizona were to sustain an injury, like Arizona healthy is a Final Four caliber team. I think we can all agree with that.
Maybe.
Right? Okay, fine. With an injury, I don't know that you can say that.
Oh yeah.
With any injury. That's
fair. You're saying their margin for error is smaller than most teams. I think that's fair when you consider they lost 3 NBA draft picks from last year and 3 almost first-round picks, 2 first-round picks, and Koloko wasn't too far out of it. Then, I think it's difficult to reload in a single season, but I think they've done okay with that. As far as whether they're playing too much, though, your actual question whether I don't think so. I'm fine with the workload as it is.
All right, I'm kind of on the fence about it. I was, you obviously, 30 minutes a game. I prefer to keep my starters a little under that at this point, but I guess can't really do that. All right, number two. As of right now, Arizona will have the Pac-12 Player of the Year when it's all said and done by yourself.
As of right now, I think you have to buy, and I think that guy is Azuolas Tubelis. All due respect to what Umar Ballo has done, I think he might even be number two in the running right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and maybe that goes to your point about how top heavy Arizona is because they depend on those two guys so much. But what Tubelis has done, not just his numbers, but the consistency. He's a double-double. He's not double-double every game, but he's always up there. He's never scored fewer than 12 points this season. He's scored 20 points, I think, 6 times. That's not easy to do at the college level. So, and his rebounds have been consistent. He's been a little more aggressive. He's had some incredible individual plays. That one play, was it against? Help me out. Was it against Montana State or the game after against Morgan State where he had he kind of like, what I'm talking about?
Morgan State.
He almost went out of bounds and kind of dribbled the ball around.
It was unbelievable. Yeah. It was incredible.
And it's a great response from him, and I'm happy for him after having a disastrous NCAA tournament and all the criticism he got, fair or unfair. So unless someone else steps up big time, I think it's Tubelis. As long as he keeps doing what he's doing, I think he's the guy.
I think you're right, Shane. I'm buying it. And if not, I think it's Ballo. I don't think there's anybody else. I'll tell you, KJ Simpson's been great at Colorado, former Arizona
former Wildcat country guest, KJ Simpson, the Wildcat country curse.
And he will be, right now, I tuned into him to watch them the other night. I think they were playing Stanford, and I think he had 30-plus points. Really, really good player.
He's the player of the week.
Yeah, with that said, he's probably first team all Pac-12. I think Azuolas Tubelis, as of right now. And it was one, I think Ballo's two, as of right now. Yeah. So I'm going to buy that. Assuming Arizona continues at a pace, and we'll talk to Bruce Pasco about that in the next segment. Yeah. That we think they can play. All right. Number three, Tommy Lloyd still has not adjusted to upper echelon defensive teams by yourself.
Well, I guess I'll buy it in that I feel like this is just kind of Tommy Lloyd's style. Now, last season, Arizona was a better defensive team. They relied on offense more, and I think that they got ousted in the tournament by a better defensive team. But you look at KenPom, they were hovering around 20. Now they did move up from in the low 70s to after the ASU game in the mid to high 50s, and that was one of their best defensive performances of the season, especially. Late in the game, they're up 6. Tubelis has that technical foul. It looked like they were going to run away with it. They're up 8, and then Tubelis gets a technical foul. ASU gets 2 free throws. They get the ball back with a chance to cut it to single digits. And it was just a great defensive possession. ASU had to force up a well-contested 3. Didn't matter because they couldn't make the open ones anyway. But that was a great defensive. So if they get more of that, and ASU is not a very good team offensively, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But I don't know it's so much of an adjustment as much as, number one, I think Tommy Lloyd's style is more focused on the offense, and we'll talk to Bruce Pasco about that too. But also, they lost. They lost to the reigning Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year and some other guys who were good on defense. So I think they'll be better. I don't know they're going to be. They're probably not going to be top 20 in KenPom. But as far as your question, has he adjusted? No, but I don't. I think that Tommy Lloyd is an offense first guy. That's just who he is.
Okay, fair. With that said, now going back and watching the game as I did, part of it, very concerning to see a 17-point lead evaporate to 1 with a team that was still not shooting that great on the other side. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, they were able to rebound and cover the spread. You got to point that out because I believe it was a 6-point spread. They were able to do that.
Yep.
But it's still concerning that they were not able to immediately solve that for a considerable period of time. And if ASU had shot better, they lose that game or would have been in serious trouble.
I am concerned that Arizona tends to blow leads. The Creighton game comes to mind. They almost blew that one. The Tennessee game.
San Diego State, where it was down to 1, same thing, and then they took off again.
I feel like, Eric, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I feel like this team gets bored. They need a challenge. Sometimes it's not so much that they get complacent. Maybe they do, but it's sometimes they're confident. And put it like this: they're confident enough to believe they're going to find a way to win, because typically they do. So they don't panic in those situations, which is good. But I think the next step is to not get in those situations to begin with. Great teams are going to make runs, and that's fine. But ASU with not just the run they made, but how they did it with 5 or 6 straight dunks or whatever it was. That was bad. It was really bad. And ASU is not that good a team offensively.
No,
so, and look, Arizona overall played good defense, but the lead slipping away does concern me. And you can tell me if I'm stupid for this, and I'm sure a lot of people on Twitter will, because they always do. But I might actually be good for this team to see a double-digit lead slip away and them not win it, just so they remember that feeling going into the NCAA tournament, just so they have in the back of their minds they're not invincible. I don't know if that's a scenario it's going to play out or even it's a good idea, but it's just something that's been in the back of my mind.
Okay, fair. I will leave it at that. I just want to see more growth going forward against better defensive teams. I'm not sure in the Pac-12 we're going to see that. UCLA can D it up. Washington State can D it up. I guess we'll see. I'm still on the fence about this one. I want to transition these next 2 questions, and we'll come back to men's basketball. Monday, Arizona lost to Stanford with the women's team. They were out-rebounded by 19 against Stanford. Now, Stanford's a top 5 rebounding team in the country. Arizona is way down there. I mean, way back. Is this I'm going to say rebounding is the Achilles heel as to why Arizona would not make a serious run in the postseason by herself?
I'll buy that that's definitely an issue. Certainly the missing Lauren Ware for rebounding purposes. That has been a bigger deal in that perspective than I actually thought it would be. Overall, though, I think it's going to sound real basic, but I think it's just scoring. They're just not a very high scoring team. They have a lot of very good players. I don't think they really have carved out an identity yet as far as the pecking order of this team, who's going to have the ball in late close game situations. Shayna Pellington kind of took over that role last year out of necessity when Aaron McDonald left. Kate Reese is great, but she's not someone who's necessarily going to take over a game late very often. Yeah. They have a lot of young potential. They don't have the leadership of Sam Thomas on this team anymore, someone who could not only is a great leader, but could bail them out with a big 3-pointer a lot of times. So I think this team is still finding its identity. I think they're going to be significantly better by the end of the season. I think that they could still make an NCAA tournament run. But yeah, I think that this team is, to your point, is missing Lauren Ware more than I expected them to. And that's a problem. You mentioned Stanford's a great rebounding team. But yeah, that's definitely a concern going forward.
Major concern. Team can score. They had, they were close in 3 of the 4 quarters. Second quarter, they had a real bad one. I think they only scored 7 points. Number 2 team in the country. This game showed Arizona probably not ready for prime time. They're good.
By the end of the season, I think they could get there. But yeah, rebounding is a definite problem. I agree with you.
All right, number 5, I want to transition to football. I'd love to be able to throw a football question in every now and then. I know we got the schedule that'll come out hopefully this month, the 2023 schedule. So we'll dive deep into that. But I've had this one on the back burner for a while, Shane. So I'm going to ask you. Buy or sell, Arizona needs a legitimate open quarterback competition this offseason.
I'll sell that they need one. I actually wouldn't mind seeing one, though. Mm-hmm. I think it could push Jaden DeLora to be even better. I mean, let's be honest. Jaden DeLora is barring something more substantial, is going to be the starting quarterback for Arizona next season. Yeah. But for Jed Fish to go in and say, look, we're going to explore all options. Noah Fafita is coming back, and obviously he wants to be the guy at some point. Braden Dorman is going to come in as a 4-star, maybe give him some reps. So yeah, I'm fine with Jed Fish calling it an open quarterback competition, even though I don't know if anyone would really necessarily believe that it is. But yeah, I would like to see. Like if he's asked, for example, do you know who your starting quarterback is next season? If he just came back and said no, even if he didn't believe that, I'd be fine. I'd be fine with that for motivational purposes.
I'm going to buy this, and I'm going to tell you why. Exactly what you said, Shane. Motivational purposes. Mm-hmm. Don't tell Jaden DeLora could get cocky if he's the unquestioned starter. If he plays like crap in spring camp, and Noah Fafita is amazing, yeah, going into fall camp, the heat should be on. Yeah. Jaden DeLora was good and won Arizona some games, but he also had his moments where, as we've discussed on this podcast, they weren't his best moments. Yeah. Noah deserves a chance as a 4-star recruit. It's very unlikely he will beat out DeLora, but DeLora needs to feel some heat. It shouldn't be like T-Mac where you're starting for sure. Jaden's going to start game 1 and probably game 2 and 3 if he's healthy next season. With that said, Noah needs to show what he can do with the ones in spring camp, in my opinion. Some of you may disagree, so be it, but I think we're on the same page here, Shane.
Well, one thing that Arizona didn't have the opportunity to do this past season was they didn't really have a quote unquote preseason game where they were able to play a lot of backups, and where, because a lot of times early in the season you play an FCS team that's not named North Dakota State. And you're able to, play guys like Noah Fafita and some other backups in the second half and kind of see what you got and give them some experience. They didn't really have that opportunity this past season. I know Fafita came in late in a couple of games in garbage time, but that's a little bit different. So hopefully, Arizona plays NAU this season. Hopefully that it will not be nearly as close, and hopefully they'll beat them this time. I suspect that they will, and that they'll have a healthy lead in the second half, and they'll be able to give those guys some playing time. But yeah, at least publicly, I'd be fine if there was an open competition. Even if privately, it's like, Jaden's there.
Well, the good news is, as you said, Shane, Arizona's schedule is going to open with NAU. I think it's Mississippi State second, or I don't remember. I think it's them second and UTEP third. So Noah's probably going to see action in 2 of the first 3 games at least. But hopefully. I still think this spring he should be taking reps with the ones.
I'd be fine with that. I'd be fine with that. Well, especially his connection with McMillan and Keon Burnett, who we didn't see much of this past season, mostly because of Tanner McLaughlin's emergence.
Correct. All right, let's get back to men's basketball. Bonus question, Shane. If you were to bet today, Arizona will be no lower than a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, buy or sell?
If I had to bet today, I'd buy it. Yeah, I think so. It's always health permitting, but great resources, bracketmatrix.com, which is basically they aggregate all the bracket predictions out there, some good, some not so good, but it's a collective. So I feel like it's more accurate. As of this recording, Arizona is the first number 2 seed, according to Bracket Matrix. So you could certainly make an argument that they're a 1. They are tied with Purdue, who just lost, I believe, to Rutgers.
Yeah, number 1 stunning. Purdue. Yeah, stunning.
So and went to overtime against Nebraska. So there's really there aren't really any like super elite teams this season. There are a lot of very good teams, but you could make a case that Arizona is a 1 seed at this point. There will be some opportunities for quality wins, even though the Pac-12 is what it is. There's UCLA and there's everyone else. But Arizona took full advantage of its early schedule by racking up so many quality wins against Tennessee and San Diego State and Indiana and Creighton. And hopefully those wins will look as good at the end of the season or better than they do now. The loss at Utah really, in terms of net rankings, wasn't bad. It was an ugly loss, but in terms of that metric, it wasn't a bad loss. So if they keep those to a minimum, maybe just have 1 loss outside the quad 1, then yeah, I think as of now, I would guess that they would be a 1 or a 2 seed in the tournament.
I would say you're probably right, but here's the kicker, Shane. I think Arizona has a margin of 4 more games. They can lose 4 more games and stay a 2 seed. You can lose 5 games, I think, and get a 2. If they were to lose 5 games or 6 games in conference and go 14-6, I'm not sure that's good enough. I think that we're talking 3, and that includes the Pac-12 tournament. So I think the key for Arizona at this point, 3 more losses in the regular season. I think they can get away with it, be a 1 or 2 seed. I think because, you got to leave the option for the Pac-12 tournament.
But I think just because of the nature of college basketball this season, Eric, that there may be even a wider margin for error than usual, because I don't think there are going to be a lot of teams that end the season with just 2 or 3 losses. This isn't like a couple of years ago where there was Gonzaga and Baylor and then everyone else. There really seems to be a wide open competition. I mean, the number 1 team at the beginning of the season, North Carolina, fell off the face of the earth for a few weeks. So I feel like it's a lot more open, and maybe some teams will emerge. But I think that in most years I would agree with you, but I think Arizona could have a Pac-12 record of, say, 15-5, maybe lose in the Pac-12 tournament championship, and have that be a scenario where even in that situation they get a 2 seed.
I'd say it just depends. You're right. I mean, it depends what everybody else does.
Yeah.
If UCLA goes in 19-1 in the conference, it's one thing. Yeah. And then Arizona's the clear number 2. You have to be at least the 2 in the conference. I mean, this is a very, very weak conference. When you look at the betting odds, Shane, and you see Arizona and UCLA are so far ahead of everybody else, as came out, as we've seen, they were almost even money, both of them, and everybody else is like 15 to 20 to 1.
Yeah,
is the next one.
I think in Pac-12 play, it's really about avoiding those landmines, which is losses to bad teams. You can afford to lose a game at UCLA, maybe at Oregon or a couple of other schools, like they would fall in that quad one category. But if you lose, so like if Arizona, for example, lost one of their home games against Washington or Washington State, especially if it was Washington this week, that's something that the committee would look at the end of the season and be like, I don't know, this is a 1 or a 2 seed. They might knock them down a line.
Yeah, I think that's a key, Shane. That's a really good point. And then we'll transition. I think if Arizona were to win out at home, as we expect them to do, what if they won 20 something in a row?
UCLA is going to be tough.
UCLA is going to be tough. But outside of that, I mean, they've won. They have one of the longest winning streaks in the country.
Yeah.
They go undefeated at home. Yeah, I think we're talking 1 or 2 seed, and you can excuse some of the road losses. Coming up next, let's talk to Bruce Pasco, the ace reporter, as I like to call him, from the Arizona Daily Star, here in Wildcat Country. Scooby, we sent you an ice shaker. They are a sponsor, courtesy of our buddy Chris Gronkowski. You have it right there.
I love my ice shaker. Fun fact: when I trained with Glenn Gronkowski, when we were trained together, people thought I was the other Gronk brother, so it's kind of funny. But yes, I love my ice shaker. It is very good. I use it every day. I am a veteran to the ice shaker game, by the way.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here. Use coupon code Wildcat Country at iceshaker.com.
Very pleased as our first guest in 2023 to welcome the maven of Wildcat basketball. I don't think anybody outside of the team knows more than Bruce Pasco of the Arizona Daily Star.
He's only said that about a half dozen other people.
No, I don't, Shane. No, I don't, Bruce. Come on.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I just know that I'm lucky enough to be around the most. I get to go to the road games, and I see them a lot in person. And
you didn't have to fly to this last one, right? So at least there's that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Except that I-10 was closed, and there was like 3 accidents before the closure, and I think I got to the game like 40 minutes before it started, which is crazy.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there. I was at the Fiesta Bowl, so I missed it.
That was a terrible game.
I was like the Fox announcers who weren't there in person. So I figured, if they're not there, I mean, I guess I can get away with it too. All right, Bruce, first question. I'm going to throw you on the hot seat right away because, it's Wildcat Country. Arizona's bench, is it a major problem going forward?
If they don't get into foul trouble or injuries, no, they'll be all right because they've been all right. But that is the one thing you wonder because, for them, you kind of want to knock on wood when they say, if they were to say this, but like they have not had any major problems this year injury wise, a little bit of things here and there. And last year they were pretty lucky too. They did lose to Bellis to a pretty significant ankle injury that he continued to play on and wasn't that effective the rest of the year. So something like that happened to somebody else. The bench becomes more of a factor. It's definitely, you're nitpicking a little bit with a team that's the number 5 team in the country that's done as well as they have, and frankly exceeded expectations again this year. But if you had to look for some Achilles heels, you might say that, and then you might say maybe, you don't have that Ben Mathurin kind of bucket getter guy, like you had last year. So automatically, there's a couple little things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, Bruce, like Eric said, thanks a lot for joining us, and you really do bring a ton of knowledge, and so that's why we have you on, and we appreciate you taking your valuable time as a journalist to educate us. So Arizona's still at number 5 nationally. They didn't leapfrog UConn, even though I thought maybe they would. You have a vote in the AP poll. Where do you have Arizona this week, and why?
I had them at 5 also, and I actually thought, just without looking at things, I thought, they might jump ahead of UConn. We'll see. And then, it's one of those deals when. And I probably spend at least an hour, sometimes a couple hours every Sunday night going through this because I don't, I take it very seriously. And so when UConn lost, it's easy to think, okay, well, they dropped down because U of A, they lost. But what happens is they drop into the bank of comparable teams with comparable resumes with one loss. And if you look at them like that, and I kind of, as the committee likes to say, you do that scrub thing and you put UConn and Arizona together, look at their schedules. UConn had a couple of road wins. Schedules very comparable, but they won twice on the road. And then the one time they lost was at Xavier. Not a bad place to lose. Utah's not either, but relatively losing you Xavier isn't as bad of a sin, so to speak, as losing at Utah. So that's why I put UConn ahead. But mainly those considerations there. But they're and I mean, you could also look at defensive ranking. I mean, I think
Sure.
UConn defensively is a lot better,
Yeah.
but that's also balanced out by the fact that Arizona's offense is really, really good. So in that sense, that's kind of a wash. I look more at just the accomplishments.
Let's talk about Arizona's offense for a minute, because they're in Ken Palm still number one in offense nationally. They've struggled in their 2 road games. They scored fewer than 70 points in both of them. Fortunate enough to play good enough defense and have ASU just miss a bunch of shots to win in Tempe. Is there a common denominator in those 2 particular games, in your opinion?
That's a good question, Shane. I don't know. I mean, in a way, they were very different, because I think the Utah game really was kind of a classic letdown game. They weren't really ready to play.
It was after Maui, right?
And they came back from Maui. They were on this big high. They had a week off. They went snorkeling. Had Thanksgiving. Just all these things. And then you go up to a high altitude. It's half full in the arena because all the Utah fans are in Las Vegas for the football game. And it just, they just weren't as normal. Whereas I think at ASU, I think they were out there, pretty much at full throttle from the beginning. They just weren't executing. And in fact, I think Tubelis even talked about this. I think he was too wound up and forced some shots early that he probably shouldn't have taken. So, I don't see anything except the common denominator. Yeah, just not shooting and particularly shooting poorly from 3 as well. I think those were common. And Arizona's a pretty good shooting team, but they do have some streakiness like pretty much a lot of teams do.
Bruce, when Arizona State cut it from 17-1 in the second half, what's going through your mind as somebody that watches this team game in, game out? Or are you thinking this team's toast, ASU's on this huge run, or are you thinking Arizona's going to get over this and they'll be fine?
Yeah, I thought they'd be fine, just because I think most of the time across the board in that situation, most of the time there is always those big comebacks, but most of the time when you see that kind of thing happen, it ends up the team that catches their wind and they just can't keep going. You just can't sustain that kind of energy when you put so much into it coming back. And, I think the one thing I thought is, ASU still hadn't hit many threes at that point. And that was the one thing I thought. I said, well, if they get hot on 3, if then they could win it, but that never really happened. And so I thought they'd be okay. And it also reminded me a lot of last year when ASU took that 14-1 run at the beginning of the game, and boom, that was gone after like 10 minutes. And Arizona led by, I think, 4 or 6 or something at halftime and went on to win by 11. And I think they led even by 20 something in the second half. So things can change pretty quickly, with Arizona in general playing at the pace they do, but also these ASU games have been kind of whipsaw things.
Yeah, good comeback by ASU, I guess, but it showed more to me that the Wildcats were able to overcome that and then win the game and cover the spread. Not that I had it, but still, there's to some people that matter. Did Arizona, in your opinion, learn? Are they going to have the same problem in the tournament that they did last year if they face a Houston or TCU? That's what I got out of watching the second half against ASU. That a better defensive team can stifle this team going forward. I mean, are you still concerned about that?
Yeah, I think. Well, there's 2 things. I mean, I think they're a little tougher. I think we saw that against Tennessee. Granted, that was a home game, but and they've shown in some other games that they maybe aren't going to be as susceptible to facing a Houston and just getting drummed, physically. But on the other hand, they're struggling a little bit defensively, especially compared to last year. Their 2-point defense, which I think is kind of maybe arguably the biggest measurement, is down quite a bit from what they were able to do last year. And part of that is, frankly, Christian Coloco not being there, where you have him around the basket and your perimeter guys can be a little more aggressive on the perimeter because they know Coloco's going to clean up any mistakes. And then, of course, they lost, Dalen Terry with all that length, and, he stole the ball a lot. He caused some problems. Ben Matherin, Akesh, would. And so and that's where you see that and that's kind of when you go back to the beginning of the season, why Arizona wasn't rated in the top 5, because they lost those 3 guys. Now you're seeing defensively, particularly, I think those 3 guys leaving is making a big impact on that. So that's the thing. So again, they're better, they're tougher maybe, but skill wise, defensively, maybe not quite as good. So it's a trade up, I guess.
Bruce, let me ask you about Pelle Larsson, because I think he got kind of off to a slow start this season, but he's made a big impact, especially against Indiana and against Tennessee. His threes haven't been falling. He's like 27% from three this year, but he's taken to the hoop. He had 5 big points against Tennessee when Arizona almost let that lead slip. He's clutched at the free throw line late. His defense is, I mean, even last year, he would be in the game late, I think, for defensive purposes. What are your thoughts on him maybe over the last few games compared to how we opened the season?
Well, he's been, I think the thing that struck me the most about him is just, well, he does a little bit of everything, but just getting to the line and hitting, what is he, 83%, I think, from the line. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
And it's made a difference. I think, a number of games they've had a huge free throw advantage in getting to the line and percentage at the line. And frankly, that's how they beat ASU when you really boil it down to it. There's been a number of games like that. So, but yeah, his 3 points not been good, 27%. I mean, that should come around. I think, the expectations were a little higher for him offensively, because he did sort of come on as last season went on, and he got past that, missing the offseason with his foot injury. So I think it's maybe arguably a little bit disappointing to relatively to his expectations. He also had a really good summer, learned a lot playing on that Swedish national team. And so I think, expectations were really high, and maybe he isn't quite there, but I think overall, I don't think Tommy Lloyd's complaining about him. He does so many things, and he does little things like, guarding those hybrid 4-mans. They don't really have anybody, and the ASU game was another example. Like sometimes you have that 6'4", 6'5" power forward, you're trying to figure out who to defend him with, and a lot of times it's either Cedric Henderson or Larson, and he's done pretty well with that.
Last time we had you on, Bruce, you mentioned Henry Vasar could ultimately be an NBA prospect, and I think we're starting to see some glimpses of that against ASU. His stats don't jump off the page, but he had some big defensive plays. I remember he had a big basket when ASU had that big run and Tubelis was out of the game, and Tommy Lloyd trusted him enough to kind of stay in there when things were going a little bit crazy. Have you seen any growth from him from the beginning of the season up until this point?
Yeah, I think just a little more comfort in general. I think he's it's interesting with him. He's played 3 years at a pretty high level club, a junior club in Europe, and just getting used to this game. But I think just, maybe this comfort level, because you saw right away, even at the Red Blue game, just his skills kind of, and the way he could run the floor kind of jumped out right away for his size, that he could do some of these things. But and again, here's another guy who has just had a lot of expectations, maybe because he came from where he came from, and you never really know with guys overseas how it's going to translate. But him, like Tubelis, there was a lot of hype that he was the best European player to go the college route in his class, as it was with Tubelis, and it's turned out that Tubelis has lived up to that, and I think Vasar may eventually it's just right away this season it's been a little bit limiting. But I also think that that may also be a factor. There's the fact that Tubelis and Ballo have been so dominant and taken so many of the minutes and points and rebounds, and which has let Vasar kind of develop at a slower pace. There's not the pressure on him. In fact, I was talking about this before, about how comparing him to, like, say, Lauri Markkanen. When Lauri Markkanen came in, like, they needed him to do everything right away, and that's not been the case. So it's just a different course. But again, you can see the skills in him, and his upside is pretty significant.
Let's talk about Kylan Boswell for a second, Bruce. We asked you about him earlier as well. He hasn't developed. I know he's 17, he's a young kid. He hasn't developed like I had hoped. What are your thoughts on what you've seen from him thus far?
Yeah, I think well, I still think it's a little early to tell. I mean, he's had a pretty good run. I think it was, I can't remember now if it was Montana State or what game it was, I think, where he got an extended run there. And even some of the big games that Tommy Lloyd's shown that he's trusted in there. And he's been pretty solid. He's a good passer. He's a pretty good shooter. I mean, he's got some good defensive potential. It's just he is very young, and wasn't supposed to be in this class. And then again, kind of like Larson last year, missed, I think it's easy to not think about how significant it is when you miss a whole preseason, because we don't see the preseason. We don't write that much about it. We don't get to watch it. There's no videos of it. Nobody knows, but like literally Kylan Boswell is sitting there with a boot for, most of the summer and fall. And then he's on a bike or whatever. He didn't really start doing much till October. So, I still think it's a little early to judge him, but Tommy Lloyd said he thinks he can be one of the best guards possibly in school history, when it's all said and done, if he sticks around. So we'll see. But I think maybe later this season, I think it'll be more interesting to see where he's at that point.
So I saw some odds, Bruce, for the Pac-12, to win the Pac-12 regular season title. And it was Arizona, UCLA tied at the top, and then everybody else like significantly back.
Yeah.
Just your overall opinion of the conference from what you've seen from the other 11 teams thus far.
Yeah, I think it's, I think with a couple exceptions, it's been probably overall a little bit disappointing, especially those other 10 teams. I think, it was kind of looking like it might be a top 4 or 5, 6 teams in the tournament. They still might get, 3 or 4 in. I think, Colorado has been looking pretty good, but then they've gotten off to a bad start and lead and just lost to Cal. I mean, so what's that? And, ASU has been a pretty good surprise for the better for them. And then they got blown out by San Francisco and then, lost to ASU where they couldn't hit a shot. So it's really something. I mean, I think Stanford has been disappointing. I thought with the guys they had back and the way they finished last season, they beat ASU in the tournament. They almost beat Arizona in the tournament, in the Pac-12 tournament, and had a lot of guys back, and they've been disappointing. Washington State has been probably worse than expected. And Oregon, and that's probably, this is the second year in a row now Oregon's not lived up to expectations. However, they've had a lot of injuries as they had before. They still could come around. I think that's probably as big a unknown as anything, as if Oregon finds a way to get into the race if they get more healthy and together. There's still obviously plenty of time in the league race for things to shake out.
Bruce, how much credit do you think Tommy Lloyd deserves? Number one, for the success this team has had in general the first year and a half he's been here, and number two, for the development of guys like Christian Coloco last year and Umar Ballo this year and Pelle Larsson. How much credit do you think he deserves for not only their maturation, but just for the success the program has had in the time he's been here? Or is it more about the players, in your opinion?
No, I think it's, and I mean, it's hard to say this as a beat writer, because I don't feel like I should throw my opinion around on things like this too much, but it's pretty obvious that these guys are getting better. I think you do have to give them credit for that. I think you have to give Sean Miller credit for bringing in guys like Coloco and Kirk Kriisa and Azuolas Tubelis when, Miller had struck out left and right on some 5-star guys back in the fall of 19. And, had to go through Zoom in the middle of the pandemic or the beginning of the pandemic and try and just scrape some talent together. And you ended up getting some really talented players. And then, but I think, we all saw last year, I think Coloco is probably the biggest example. He was getting better under Miller. There's no question about it. He was really pretty good as a sophomore, but last year he just completely took off. So you got to give the staff some credit for that. And, even a guy like, Ben Matherin elevated a little bit last year. Dalen Terry got better. And I think this year you're seeing a guy like, Kirk Reese has gotten more consistent, and a lot of these better. I think the interesting thing is we don't know yet about some of these freshmen, like we just spoke about with Basar and Boswell. Those will be really interesting to see how they develop. But I think that's been a big piece of it is, the development and what bodes well for this program is that Tommy Lloyd's really, even in this transfer portal NIL era, he's recruiting guys that he, as much as he can anyway, it appears, find guys that are going to stick around and be committed. And that in a lot of cases means getting international guys who don't grow up changing high schools and clubs every 2 months or whatever, so they're not used to transferring and they stay there and then you can develop them. So that bodes well for Arizona too.
Last question for you, Bruce. scheme wise, game planning wise, can you do a quick comparison of Tommy Lloyd to Sean Miller in terms of maybe what Tommy Lloyd does a little bit better and maybe what Sean Miller did a little bit better?
Well, I think probably it's simplistic, but I'd say simply offense and defense. I mean, Tommy Lloyd's offense is, not only up tempo, but just so much more efficient. It's fun to watch. It's, guys seem to enjoy it. The players seem to enjoy it. There's a lot of just good vibes out there. And, they're hard to defend against because they can do so many things with their flexibility and the way guys know to look for each other and I can work with each other and just kind of improvise a little bit. It's hard to defend against. I think with Miller was maybe arguably a little more predictable sometimes to go after them and stop them. But on the other hand, Miller's teams were typically very, very good defensively. Those obviously we know those two Elite Eight teams in the 14 and 15. Those were elite defensive teams, and and frankly tough. They were tough teams, and I think even the core of the team that Miller left behind had a little bit of that toughness, inside of them. So, guys like Tubelis and Creasa really kind of grew from that experience. And so, I don't know. I think that's probably the biggest thing that strikes me.
All right, and last one. It's an easy one for you, Bruce. Very easy, of course. Not putting you on the spot at all. 17 games left in the regular season. Predict Arizona's record before the Pac-12 tournament.
Seventh was at 13-1 now, right? So
how many more are they going to lose basically out of 17?
Yeah. I mean, not thinking ahead. I mean, I will say they get, well, here's one thing. I mean, they don't go to Colorado this year. So that's one less loss. I mean, and maybe it's not fair to say that, but the fact is they've lost 4 in a row, I think, in Boulder. And they, the way things are going this year, you'd have to think they probably would be favored to lose anyway. So I would say probably, and I think the X factor, of course, is injuries or foul troubles, to our point earlier about lack of depth. So I would say probably, probably 4 games they lose, I think, from here on out, but maybe less than that. And again, and I'm saying that because I'm incorporating that there's going to be some kind of adversity, and I'm not trying to jinx anybody. I'm just saying that the odds are some kind of adversity is going to hit this team. So right. I can see them losing at least 2 or 3 games, possibly 4.
Okay. I was thinking the magic number was 3 or less.
Yeah.
I think 4 is interesting, but we always appreciate your honesty. You come in, you always are telling it straight. So we always appreciate it. Thanks for joining Shane and I. And, we'll talk to you again soon.
Well, sure. And I'm also wrong sometimes too, Eric.
No.
Oh,
well, I mean, listen, no, the only one, but see,
yeah.
You admit it though, Bruce. I mean, a lot of people will be like, no, I didn't say that. You said, hey, like last year you came on and said, I voted this team 6th in the preseason Pac-12 poll. Right. And you owned it.
But I thought the same thing. And I think, but a lot of fans, if they were honest, thought the same as well. So
yeah, we didn't know. We had no idea. Tommy Lloyd had never been a head coach. We had no idea exactly how good those players were that Miller left behind and how Tommy Lloyd would relate to them. And it all turned out better than anybody expected. Probably even better than Tommy Lloyd himself.
Always great to have you on, Bruce. Great info. And thank you for the dialogue. It's great to catch up with you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
If you're looking to add value to your sports cards, you've got to check out dtsportscards.com. They're an authorized dealer for PSA, which means you'll get great prices on your submissions if you go through them. And for just $2 a card, DT Sports Cards will take a close look at each card you submit and let you know whether it's worth grading. I just submitted some high-end hockey cards. They took a very close look, said they're good to go, and they all earned a PSA 10 grade, which tripled the value of each card. DT Sports Cards is located right here in Arizona. They provide quick, personalized service through email or direct messages. Find them online at dtsportscards.com and check them out on Instagram at dt_sportscards.
Great to have on Bruce Pasco once again. Just great intel. We have some great guests, and Bruce, as I said, and I stand by it, I don't think very many people know more about the program being an outsider, not inside the locker room on the team as Bruce does. He's fantastic, and great conversation with him. All right. This is our third segment, which is presented by DT Sports Cards. And Shane, there's a big card show that you want to talk about later this month?
Well, GT Sports Cards is going to be at that show. It's the Chandler Gilbert Card Show, January 28th. I'm looking at it right at 644 East Chandler Boulevard, January 28th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. At 644 East Chandler Boulevard. I will be a seller at that show. First time in my life, I'm going to be a seller at a card show. So I'll have a lot of cards there for sale. And then DT Sports Cards, which they are Relations PSA dealer. So if you're looking to get your cards graded, I go through them for all of the cards I get graded through PSA. Dave, who runs DT Sports Cards, he'll take a really good look at your cards and tell them whether you should send them in. They're likely to get a high grade, or you should save your money and not do it at all. So highly recommend them. They're going to be there too. If you're looking to submit some PSA cards, dtsportscards.com. Definitely go check them out.
All right. And another thing that we're going to start talking about here on the show, very honored, Shane and I are very honored. On February 17th, the 2023 Wildcat Toast and Taste event presented by the East Valley chapter of the Arizona Alumni East Valley chapter is going to be held at the Phoenix Airport Marriott, 6 p.m. Special guest is Rocky LaRose, who is a legend in the Arizona Athletic Department. And Shane and I will be emceeing the event. Now, I was fortunate enough to MC the Terry Francona event the other year. And now we have a full Wildcat Country event, or emceeing the event. So really excited about that. So if you want to get your pictures taken with Shane Dale at the event, go to alumni.arizona.edu/events and look for the Toast and Taste and buy your tickets. And it'll be great to meet some of you out there. And hopefully you'll see enjoy a very fun live episode of Wildcat Country that we'll be doing with the East Valley chapter. So,
are we gonna make a live episode out of the
well, I don't think we're gonna record it for the podcast, but I think it's going to be the equivalent of a live episode.
Because I'm open to it. If there was a way to do that, let's do it.
If there was a way to do that, it'd be fun.
Yeah, come meet Eric and I, and actually got a couple of chances to meet me. And I think Eric, you're going to try to stop by the card show as well. So January 28th or February 17th, you said?
Yep, February 17th, Friday, February 17th. You know, it's great. And we've had a chance to meet some of our listeners at different times throughout the year. And I've met a couple of games, and Shane and I met somebody at the spring game in 2021. So we always enjoy getting to chat it up with you guys. And most importantly, thank you, as always, for listening. All right, a couple housekeeping measures. Bowl picks was not very good, Shane, for the Pac-12. And therefore, my picks went spiraling down. In all the and yours weren't great either. Did
I do any better than you?
No, you were one game behind me.
Oh, goodness.
So I was 8-7 in the bowls. You were 4-11.
My gosh! And that includes I got the Penn State game right though, didn't I?
You got the Penn State game right.
Even with that, goodness gracious.
That, yeah. So it was a rough one for both of us. I now have a 7-game lead on you with 1 to play. So I will be the unofficial champion this year, but still,
congratulations, sir.
Yeah,
you're the one who's got the CBS Sportsline column. You're the one who should hopefully, because if I'm getting this right and you pay a lot more attention than I do, then something's wrong. So
and
it's the way the world should be.
And I'm on the CBS on the Sportsline YouTube show called Early Edge. I am now on a few times a week, giving out some betting picks.
Is that the one with Jonathan Coachman?
With Coachman, yeah.
Coach.
The coach is great. And so if you have a chance, take a look at that. It's free on YouTube. Just search Sportsline. And I'll be on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on Early Edge and 5 this week. So there's a little plug for that. All right.
Very nice.
There's one college game left, Shane. We're going to pick it. We picked everything else. Georgia is a 12.5-point favorite over TCU. By the way, I was at the Fiesta Bowl.
Tell us about it. You're the only one in the stadium who wasn't sweating it out.
I had the overline, so I felt great about it. I mean, honestly, I was like, all right.
Well, I'm just saying you're not a Michigan or TCU fan, so you can just sit back and enjoy the craziness.
I didn't care who won. I wanted to see a great game, and I did. It was one of the crazier games I've ever been to. I'd say that, when I think about crazy and important games I've ever been to, 2003 Miami-Ohio State National Championship game, 2014 Arizona-Cal, the Hail Mary is one that comes to mind. Even that season with the Washington game with the, Washington fumbled and Casey Scourin kicked a late field goal. Yep. The ASU game was also crazy. This one probably top 2 or 3 just insane games that I've been to, college games. And it was fantastic. It really put on a show. And what's crazy is I've been picking against TCU all year, and they keep proving me wrong. So, Shane, I'm going to let you start this one off. Georgia's a 12.5-point favorite against TCU. Will Georgia win big, or do you think this one's going to be close?
Well, first of all, we both nailed our predictions, didn't we, for a Michigan-Ohio State rematch?
We were just a little bit. I mean, Ohio State should have been there. They outplayed Georgia.
By the way, did you see someone synced up that kick?
Fantastic.
The Ohio State kick right as the ball dropped and the clock hit midnight. Amazing stuff.
Amazing.
Gosh, I've been doubting TCU for so long. I feel like as soon as I embrace them, they're gonna screw me over. But I think I'm part of the. I think I've been hypnotized by the hypno toad, Eric. I think that 12.5 points. Don't know if I'm bold enough to predict TCU to win, even though I think they're more than capable of doing that. Because I don't think this Georgia team is as good as last year's team. I still don't. They were very fortunate to beat Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I'm going to pick TCU outright, but I think they cover. 12.5 actually surprises me. I figured it'd be closer to 7 or 8 points. So I'm going to go with TCU to cover.
It's very rare. We've never seen in the college football playoff era 2 semifinals be this close in the same year. I don't think we're going to see a close championship game. I think Georgia is going to beat them badly.
You think we've gotten spoiled and okay.
Yeah, no, I've been wrong about TCU often, so I'm not taking this one to the bank. If I were to bet one thing right now, and obviously we'll take a look at it as the week goes along. I'm sure I'll put something out on Twitter. I like the under. We saw 2 high scoring games. I don't think you're going to see that again.
What is the line on the over?
The 60s. Last check.
Okay.
It was like 62. Let me see. It is 62.5. Yeah. I just think that seems a little bit excessive. I could see. I don't think TCU is going to have a lot of success against that Georgia D. Then again, I would have said the same about the Michigan game. And what do you know? I think Georgia wins this game somewhere in the neighborhood of like 34-17, somewhere in that ballpark is what I'd say. Look, the only thing that I would bet right now is the under.
Well, what impressed me most about TCU's win was that Duggan, he didn't have that great a game, at least throwing the ball. And they still scored 51 points. Now, obviously, the pick six had something to do with that. The defense had a lot to do with that. But the fact that TCU was able to score that much. And by the way, the play of that game was on 3rd and 7 after Michigan cut the lead to 3.
Oh yeah,
and it looked like TCU was going to go 3 and out. And Duggan completes that pass as he's falling down. They go all the way for a touchdown. So
yeah, Johnston, that receiver, fantastic.
So basically, a Big 12 football game broke out. And if that happens again. Then I think it favors TCU. The higher scoring this game is, the higher chance that TCU finds a way to win.
I would like to see TCU win this game. Now, let me just say that. It's great for college football. Yeah. I picked Colorado to beat TCU in week 1. I have doubted TCU all season.
Well, TCU was picked to finish, I think, 7th in the Big 12. So there you go.
I think somebody told me the stat. I don't know if it was you, Shane. They had the exact same preseason odds to win the national championship as Arizona.
Is that right?
Yep. Something like 200-1. Yep.
Why couldn't it have been us?
Why
not Arizona?
I was just going to say, as Rich Rod used to say, why not Arizona? All right. Last thing this show, Shane, predictions for the weekend. Arizona the men's team plays 2 games at home against the Washington schools, and the women's team this weekend plays. Let me double check. They play the Oregon schools at home. So we have all 4 games at home. Oregon right now is number 18 on the women's side. Yeah. Are we going to see a sweep this weekend, Shane, or do you have concerns?
I think so. I get concerns. I mean, the best game is probably of the 4 is probably going to be the Arizona Oregon women's game. It's an evenly matched contest, but I think Arizona's pulled it together, I bet, since that debacle against Kansas. Stanford's just a really dang good team, so you take that with a grain of salt. Plus, it was at Stanford. So I think the women win both games. The men, I think they may have trouble with Washington State, which should have beaten UCLA a few days ago. Washington State let a lead slip away in Pullman. So the Cougars are actually a pretty good, reasonably balanced team. They get their act together. They could be a dark horse to make the NCAA tournament, even though I wouldn't pick them to make it. But I think Arizona finds a way to win both games, even though I think the Washington State game may be a little bit too close for comfort.
Arizona's going to win both these games. I'm going to say maybe not both by double digits, but I think they will be at least 7 points for both. How about that?
Yeah, I'm thinking really like 74-65 kind of game against Washington State, but I think they probably win by 15, 20 points, maybe more.
I think there's high scoring against Washington.
Yeah,
this is the game. It's a late game on Thursday. I think Arizona drops close to 90 again.
I just don't think either team has the offense to keep up with Arizona. It's kind of like ASU. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. It will be interesting to see if Tommy Lloyd, against a defensive-minded Washington State team, makes some adjustments based on what we saw against ASU. So I want to thank Bruce Pasco for joining us once again. Another great show, Shane. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. As always, thanks for listening, and bear down.